you need to have a different container in your mind for just focusing on the PMP and just for real life.
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, joined today by my guest, Gabor Stramb, project management PMP trainer extraordinaire.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and the 5 people that might not know who you are?
Sure. So my name is Gabor Stramb, and I'm a project management practitioner, like I like to say it. So I also practice what I preach. And besides that, I'm helping people passing the CAPM/the PMP exam within 8 weeks. That's my secret sauce, which was really born out of the challenges I went through, which challenges were that I failed CAPM, then waited enough time to do the PMP, failed once, failed twice, and only passed the third time. And ever since, I'm on a path to help around 10,000 people to not suffer and pass by first try.
Well, I got you beat. I failed it 3 times before I passed it.
Yeah. I meet like lots of people each week. So at least 5 to 10 different people. And I came across people who actually been, failed 5 times or even 6 times. And those people are, they are so committed and they are really would like to improve and get they really see the huge value, what is come with the certification and the badge and the title. But fundamentally, they were not doing the right thing, what is really leading towards you to pass the exam. And I think I like to say to people as well that we have lots of information. So the time when you start your PMP preparation, you do not need someone to explain to you what the scope baseline is or what is the critical path. You know this already, but instead of how things are working in the best practice universe and how real life you're doing projects, if you're able to connect this together to make sure you have a reference point for the best practice, now that's where things will improve, and the improvement is you answer questions quickly and correctly as well and pass.
Well, you learn how to choose the best answer, not always the right answer.
And you said it very well, because I think, creating meaningful questions for the PMP exam. You cannot create, let's say, 5,000-10,000 questions for this. It's going to be very, very difficult. But after a while, you can only challenge people if you say, here is a question, and I'm going to give you answers which are not answering the question, or all of them are incorrect, but one is correct or least worse than the others, but I'm telling you why. You're doing my exam, not the other way around, or they imposing you all correct answers and you still have to pick one which is better than the other one, focusing on principles, best practices, and that takes time. And not just what you mentioned, but maybe add on top is the time constraint. So the 180 questions in 230 minutes, that's absolutely a race. And I think if simply PMI would have been give you another half an hour, people just have more time totally reading through questions and answering them correctly.
Well, but I would push back a little bit on that
Okay.
A little bit of the pressure and the urgency verifies that you actually know it, because when you have time to pause and think and relax a little bit, it takes some of the pressure off. And I think part of the whole process is you have to be able to think under pressure and think critically under pressure.
I think I partially agree with that, but I think around 60% of the population who's doing the PMP worldwide, for them, English is a second language. So they definitely can benefit on the learning side, where they're learning the syllabus on a language which they use only at work. And some of them are still doing, let's say, parallel translation of this is what the English version means, this is how we do it in real life. And that's where that's also can be time consuming. And, think about, just my own example. So I'm Hungarian, you cannot do this exam on Hungarian. You have to do it in English. And I do remember I had to catch up with the vocabulary a little bit and what the different meanings are also saying in any given question. So, yeah.
Well, that's a valid point. I guess I take it for granted a little bit being in the US that everything is in English. So not necessarily thinking globally like I probably should be sometimes.
But there's a very interesting phenomenon. So there are people who actually for example, people started to studying in Spanish. They can do it in Spanish, but halfway through they change into English because you have way much more learning materials and educational materials in English than any other language. So I see that examples many times. Even I have students, they started in Spanish, but completely switched to English and then finishing off and get the exam in English. So
Interesting.
yeah.
So one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is because I want to talk about the PMBOK 8 and the elephant in the room that PMI has dropped, a couple months ago. So let's talk about some of the changes and some of the different the way they're rewording it, I guess, and changing their processes and thoughts about it.
So overall, it was some extent anticipated because we had the current PMP exam since in place January 2021. Now PMBOK 7 was introduced January 2022. Great. Now we are 2026 now. So there's a new version of the PMBOK guide. What is, I would say, a key change is that, so the current setup, what PMI does, they're separating the mindset and they're separating how we're doing projects. So the know-how itself. And on the predictive side of things, the PMBOK 7 was always just a mindset tool, whereas we still had another book called Process Practice Guide, which was giving us, the 49 processes, the baselines, the critical paths, the stakeholder engagements, procurement, all that kind of defined there. And then what they did is that they removed the knowledge areas at that point of time. So there's all coming in a single big flow. And now PMBOK 8, here we are back again. Now it seems like it's going to be consolidated into a single material, and we're going to get certain knowledge areas back, which is going to be awesome. So there are changes, but comparing, let's say, how the exam is structured in terms of the content, there is a change about 20% than comparing what it is today. So there is a change. It's not a dramatic turnaround and shouldn't be, but it's about a good 20% difference.
So it kind of sounds like we're going a little bit closer to version 6 than we are to version 7.
I think, for my opinion, this goes back to the origins that, PMBOK 6 on its own, technically you can do anything and everything you like, any kind of project. That's the cookbook. If you follow to the T, you can get it done. It's just a matter of time, of an experience of how fast you can do requirements gathering or validating scope or change management. And using that example, Agile was only created for one purpose only, to run software development projects more efficiently. So in one hand, Agile was always have the software focus, and in the best practice terms, PMI say you cannot just cherry pick certain things. You have to just simply go all in. And that's why there was always a misunderstanding of, what is really hybrid, how we can use Agile in certain environments. But again, in the best practice universe for the PMP exam, waterfall for everything, including IT software projects. But Agile is only IT software projects, not more, not less. And that level of confusion, which is around there for a long time now, for 4 or 5 years, it's started to be slightly more streamlined, because now we at least we practice that. We keep telling people in the past 4 years that this is how the exam is looking like. So it's no longer the latest PMBOK guide. There are other materials as well. Yeah. So we did the learning curve. Let's put it this way. And I think from the next, from 2026 up until I think 2030, 31, when the exam or the new book will be released, we're going to see 2 times more people sitting on the exam. The current 1.7 PMPs will go up to, I think, around 3 million. Or even more, so that self-fulfilling prophecy by PMI, that there will be more project managers needed, more certified people needed. We're absolutely moving into that direction. Absolutely.
So with the, I know PMI has announced that the new exam doesn't take shape until July. So we've got the book for about 6 or 7 months before we actually have to worry about testing on it. And how are you looking at this to be able to reformat your instructional material? Because, as an instructor, you've got to figure out, how do I teach this material and how do I shift from 7 to 8? And assuming that nobody knew 7 before, how do I teach 8 without prior knowledge of 7?
That's a very valid point, but I think the transition will be easier, because again, to this multi-document and multi-source of information, from a process practice guide to a PMBOK 7, now we're consolidating into one, which will make everybody's kind of life easier. I think I'm going to give myself a good 3 months. So from April onwards, I'm going to start the preparation for July, to make sure that we have the new type of content. And I think the breakdown in terms of how the questions are distributed is also, let's say, changing. So from a 50-50, that 50% predictive, 50% agile, we go looking to my notes, 40% predictive, and then 60% agile hybridish solution, which is again now is a bit of a shift than comparing what it is today. But going back to your question, so since agile is always well known for value delivery, value proposition, and when the value is in the focus, whereas waterfall was always known for the process driven approach. If I follow the process, I can make things happen. Now the value was always there, but it was not as emphasized as on agile. Now PMBOK 7 introduced the concept of how we can drive value through waterfall, but still following the processes, where they said is going to be a complete customization of things. But the reality was, unless the question will say so, you have 18 plans, 33 documents, all the baselines, all the ITTOs. There's no exception. So that's why I would say that PMBOK 7 will always represent the type of theoretical principles, which I think much more easier can be applied real life than for the exam. Because again, if the question doesn't say so, I have to still go on the other side with the 49 processes, how they flow together, how they interact with each other.
Yeah, that 49 process map, I passed on my fourth try because I memorized that thing to where I could write it out from memory. I spent the year break learning that thing to be able to just take a blank sheet of paper and write it out from memory. And I've said this numerous times, but one of the things I realized was probably about half of the questions give you half of the answer right there in the question, because they tell you either what you've just finished to ask you what's next, or they ask you what is prior to, like, what are you doing when this is next?
Yeah, I fully agree with you. So even currently my students in the current exam, there is an activity, an exercise when within a month or so, they are able to, I like to say, learn the table, the 49 process table, not necessarily memorize it. Overall, you're going to remember lots of things, but it's really helpful when you are solving questions. Because if you read the question and you are able to determine is this a waterfall or agile question, it's very much easier to find the correct answer. And in case of the waterfall, the 49 process table comes into play when you identify this is a waterfall question in front of you, and you are able to determine where you are in a process. And give you a good example. So keywords like analysis can happen 2 times in the process, either planning, you create the great plan, or monitoring, controlling when you are evaluating whatever you did is matching with the plan. And you go like, aha, now I know. So if you have any answer which is in closing, obviously not a good answer. Any answer initiating, absolutely not a good answer. So that is just simply helping you find the ways to find the correct answer, which is on the screen. And the 49 process, the understanding of it is still a huge enabler. I mean, all of my students, they have the workbook. We keep emphasizing to exercising that table every study day. And that's one of the key reasons you can pass the exam, besides the knowledge you have, of course.
And the knowledge you have isn't all from experience, doesn't always translate to what the PMBOK says.
That's a very valid point. And okay, but how you tackle that? I like to say that you cannot study 3 hours every day. Not even every day on a study day. You cannot study 3 hours. Why you cannot study 3 hours? Because you need to be very, very focused. Otherwise, all your experiences and knowledge from real life coming into play, and you started to disagree what you are reading or listening to or questions you do, you get pissed off right away. You say, this is not true, the question is not right, so on and so forth. So you can go into the very end, endless loop of sometimes even complaining. But at the end of the day, I would say that you have to distinguish completely. Like when you study for the PMP, you're studying how the best practice universe should work, with the challenges, with the solutions, which are always working with the same mindset. Whereas real life, I like to say real life, we like to make it work. And let me give you a very good example. Hybrid is almost a non-existent thing by PMI. And the reason why that sounds my contradicting a little bit, but if you think about it this way, there is a best practice for predictive, there's a best practice for agile. Is there a best practice book for hybrid? And there isn't. So what is really hybrid is we start with the base, which is the 5 building block, the predictive, the initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. And then according to PMI, I am replacing a building block like execution, and I exchange it to Scrum. Now that is hybrid. But again, that's just a theoretical discussion. So I would say that anyone who's going into what is hybrid, what is not hybrid, for the PMP exam perspective, is a super entertaining discussion. Yeah, I mean, everyone will say different things, everyone believes different things, and when the beliefs are strong, people get very passionate. But if you think okay, so let's say we fetch in initiating, planning, and we're doing Scrum, but what we're going to do afterwards? Let's say, are we going to have a stakeholder report? Are we going to have a backlog? Are we still going to have a change request? Nobody write this down as a best practice. So that's why I would say those questions are still the most challenging and will continue to be the most challenging looking forward, because there will be, again, small caveats, small nuances, which will make one answer better than the other one. So the big fun will continue, let's put it this way, with the hybrid. But PMBOK 8, it says, so it aimed to provide us more clarity. But again, if there is no, let's say, I have to admit I need to check, but there is no such a thing as, here's a hybrid project and here are the mapping of the 49 processes to a hybrid project. Because again, the best practice aim to serve for any kind of project, any kind of industry out there. As soon as PMI makes it so specific, then it's not going to be the best practice for everywhere. And I just wanted to remind everyone, that's why PMI never give you a project charter template, a risk register template, a lessons learned template, a WBS template, nothing. They're just going to give you the shovel and you find the gold, my friend. And on real life, anything which we say hybrid, we make it work. Either the organization push or the customer need or the deadline or the budget you have that will push you to find solutions which are maybe unconventional, but most likely completely outside of the circle of the best practice. But, nobody will call the PMI police department and send you the PMI SWAT team and say, why are you not using the best practice type of thing? So again, real life, you can do and use whatever you like to do. But to the PMP exam, you need to have a different container in your mind for just focusing on the PMP and just for real life, because that is challenging.
How do I apply for the PMI SWAT team?
I think I can be a good sergeant. Yeah, for sure. I can train the SWAT team from now on, but that would be interesting.
I know there's the Agile police.
Yeah, but with the Agile is, I think, so there was the set of people, they went to the resort, they come up with this great idea.
Yep.
Now they went down to the history book creating Agile. But, there are also the other delivery methods of Kanban, Scrum, and so on and so forth. So it's no longer like, one set of people and one path and owning it. It's just now is multiple people. So multiple people and multiple institutes feeling the ownership and the holding the truth or holding the holy grail of this is what is really Agile. So that's where there are even more passionate people about best practices. But as we've seen by other examples, PMI is like to combine and merge organizations under the big umbrella of best practices. So that might be something which can happen looking forward as well.
Yeah, one of the things anybody who's followed me for any amount of time knows I like to say is best practices are called best practices for a reason, but they're also not called all the times for a reason.
Yeah.
Because we built those best practices off of the backs of history, lessons learned, and everything else, but not everything that you do is going to be following that best practice that worked for 90% of the population.
That's exactly right. And best practices aim to incorporate everything which went well or did not went well. But I always like to say people is that you really have to distinguish between your real life experience versus the PMP, because the more you do it, the less painful this will be. Because the other paradox is that, so most people arrive doing the PMP, in your mid-30s or even your mid-40s, and it was really, let's say, a long time when you've been part of a very, structured education where, let's say, you might went to a workshop or 1 day, 2 days, 3 days training, or even, let's say, doing some quick fixes like 2-3 hours online courses, which is, I'll say nothing wrong with that, but this one requires significant amount of time. And we are started to be in an era where keeping your attention on the same thing for a longer period of time is a challenge on its own, not even talking about, a certain context or how much material you need to learn or even just cover for the PMP exam. So that is, I would say, a challenge on its own, that how you can maintain your focus just to focusing on one thing. And I think that's why the exam is just simply mentally tiring for most people, that, yeah.
Yeah. And, and I wrote about this on LinkedIn probably a week or two ago about the misunderstanding of the 10,000 hour rule to become an expert.
Mm-hmm.
Because we talk about 10,000 hour rule and everyone's like, oh, well, let me just go practice something for 10,000 hours and I'll call myself an expert.
Mm-hmm.
But what they leave off is one key word there: 10,000 meaningful hours of practice. Meaning if you're just reading the PMBOK cover to cover,
it will not make you
you're not getting much because you're just reading it, but you're not absorbing it. But if you sit there and spend half an hour a night actually reading a chapter to absorb what you're reading, then that half an hour is well spent versus 4 hours of just on a Saturday afternoon when you relax on the couch and read the PMBOK cover to cover.
Oh, no, I fully agree with you. So project management in this sense is a very unique career path that is, everything is experience driven. So first you get the experience, then you educate yourself afterwards, which versus with other professions is very, very unique. That's why, the PMP has so much of a credibility here that is technically over any kind of university degree in project management. And I think that's going to be the era looking forward, where you are absolutely right, is that you have to make it meaningful. Now, luckily enough, most companies are using the PMI framework some shape or form, which is great. But, the real reality check, or the slap on the face when you do your PMP and you started to realize that, oh, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, we're not doing this. Now, can you implement it? Well, you can try. That's how you go into a promotion cycle at your company, especially if there's a meaningful, tangible results to be proven by changing it or getting more structure in place. But there is always, you need to find the fine balance of what is too much structure versus, I don't know, micromanagement versus just good enough. And I think that's where the balance needs to be found. And then the best practice, I think sometimes people misinterpret the best practice and they try to follow it down to the T for every letter, for every page. But you cannot do it. And you need to be 10 times more flexible than that. And because that is, when I would say that if I have to implement real life everything PMP, you can't. It is almost impossible. But there are certain elements which you can take out, and you can do it almost any project, which is going to be, the level of thoroughness of risk management. That's one of the clearest path to promotion. If you do it down to the T, how it's been explained, from qualitative to quantitative analysis, and you rigorously, relentlessly follow up on a weekly basis, that will not go unnoticed. Or the emphasis on communication, managing the stakeholders, because again, it's easy to say managing stakeholders, but are you creating a stakeholder engagement matrix in real life? Most likely not. Or then give it a try to make sure that you can build a stakeholder relationship there. So there are certain things which you can definitely take out and implement it in real life. Not all of it, but that's also, it seems like an art than anything else.
And one of the things I like to say is that the PMBOK and PMI structures are built in a sterile environment. The real world is messy and doesn't always go based off of the structure of what the book says needs to happen next.
But we should not neglect that. And many times, companies or projects are, how to say it, they are limited by resources, or limited by money, limited by, human power, or limited by the deadline, limited by the contracts they have. And we just have to make it work. And, sometimes I do remember once in the organization, we've been told that you need to be more agile. And I think our version of agile was that let's have daily stand-up meetings. And we call it daily stand-up meetings, but it was not even shape or form close to the best practice. It was technically it was more than the best practice in terms of duration. And technically just doing, let's say, a daily status call in the morning. But we call it a stand-up meeting. At that point of time, everybody was more happy that we are flexible with demonstrating agility in our projects. And
that's why I started PM Mondays, was because so many people I would talk to as PM, we're trained PMs, and I talked to somebody that wasn't a PM, and I'd ask them about, oh, how are you running your projects? And they'd say, oh, we're doing Agile. Oh, so, you do this daily stand-ups, and are you doing Kanban, or you have a Scrum board? What are you doing? And they're like, we're moving quickly and breaking things. And I was like, so you have no idea what that means. and you're saying it out loud. So I started every Monday I introduce those concepts and I break them down in layman's terms for everybody else to understand, because if we're not educating everybody about what we're doing, then when we're actually trying to accomplish things with teams, if people don't understand what these fundamentals and best practices mean, they don't care, they don't understand, and they wonder, why do we have to do this? Like, what's the purpose of a daily stand-up call if you don't explain to them, this is so the Scrum Master knows what he or she needs to worry about for that day or that week?
And I think this comes with the entitlement, when you see more and more forums where people say, including myself, that you are a project manager even though you not have the title or you don't know about it, but you are a project manager. And everybody is a project manager on the extent. And I think that entitlement, translate into people that they do not need to educate themselves. They already know it, even though they call it differently. But I think what, for example, the Institute is doing an extremely good job is to make sure that you are in a continuous learning curve. So the learnings or assumptions and knowledge you had, let's say 10 years ago, obviously is not proven right, at 2026. And so that's why you need to be in a continuous learning curve. And I think that's where, every PM should understand that, being a project manager, that's not a side rail of your career for 5 years. You can be a PM for 40, 50 years as well, even though it might sound like crazy, but that's the reality of it, because the more experience you have in a specific industry, in a specific type of projects, the more valuable you are on paper, and by default, the experience should translate into a way that, you are able to or capable to manage more complex projects in the first place. And that's where, the lots of what if discussions, or what if this, what if that, might be proven wrong or right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I say there's 3 buckets of project managers in this world.
Okay.
There's the super niche PM, like you said, that's been doing the same industry or the same specific type of project for a long time. So they're the subject matter expert in that type of project specifically. Then there's the generalist like me, who's worked in every industry imaginable. And then there's construction, because we always ask any PM, construction is its own world.
Well, I think you are right, but I do believe that, on the same definition, people in finance, the way they're running banking projects in the US or in the UK, there's so much similarity into them. The key focus areas of risk, cost, or stakeholder communications are very much the same. Whereas in construction, that's more, deadline driven, to ensure that there are the scope efficiency, the resource efficiency, coping with the unpredictable labor costs or material costs. But that's why, or in software, so software projects are also run very similarly in wherever you go around the globe. So I do believe that, the synergies are there on that industry level. And I think there can be especially a new area, if somebody would like to, let's say, be a competent, project manager in that specific area. There is even a room for, creating your own certification, if you like, because the standard will stay with PMI. I think now they have a certification just for construction project managers, which is great. Are they going to have something dedicated for other industries? Maybe, maybe not. You never know. But that's an area where definitely somebody can come back with a very specified curriculum, like the SAFe, like the Scaled Agile framework. So much of, let's say, that's the next level of Agile, where, okay, you can get the Scrum Master certificate, you can get the PMI ACP, you have all the base, great. And then that has been seen and valued on the way that once you have this base, now you are ready to go and to scale yourself and then go to the SAFe Agile framework. And I think that possibility is still out there, whoever would like to take it, because the best practice will remain. And I think will still be the bread and butter for everybody's understanding of how the mechanics of a project works, because through your roles, through your career path, you might get exposed in specific areas and you might do them very well, but you still have to have the overarching understanding of what the project is. And you never know, maybe in 20 years, project manager has been named as same as like or right next to a doctor, not necessarily a surgeon, but maybe right next to a doctor, GP, maybe.
Well, let's pause here for a second to mention that I have a Patreon for the show where every guest that comes on participates in the post-mortem interviews. And in that, I dive deeper with every guest and we talk about some stuff behind the paywall where they share some of their insights, tips, tricks, things that their expertise on. Obviously, with Gabor, we're going to be talking about PMP study strategies. He may even have a resource that he's willing to share with only the Patreon subscribers that want to be behind that paywall and help support the show, because that's the most important part of this is those Patreon subscriptions help support the show, help keep paying for all the stuff that I've got to pay for to provide this and find all the guests and value and all the value that's provided to everyone. So let's transition to something else, because I know you're very passionate about this and it's something that not a lot of people talk about, and that's the CAPM. Because I know when I was first starting out, the CAPM was kind of a black mark. Like it was one of those things where you saw it and everyone just kind of thumbed their nose at it because you didn't have your PMP.
Oh, that's a very good point. And still date, I would say that half of the people applying CAPM, they do not realize they have enough experience to apply for the PMP, because I would say what is changed even in let's say past 5 years is that, so the understanding of what is a project has been widened. So therefore the application for the PMP is also widened, but PMI never, lowered the bar in terms of entering or being accepted for the PMP. But understanding of what the project is getting more and more wider now, which is a good thing. Now, in terms of the CAPM, I think the people, there are people who say that I need to go through a complete educational cycle. So they go CAPM, then they go PMP, even though this is not a necessary step. So it's like, if you have the experience, you should go for the PMP, because the big differentiator is simply, the CAPM, applying for the CMP doesn't require the work experience as a project lead, only the training hours you need to cover. So you are right. Still, there are people who are on a limbo to which path they should go. What I noticed that half of the people applying CAPM they are good to go for the PMP, but they do not realize. And I think it's down to a little bit on the marketing side of things, because what I'm saying is that because I think we have around 60, 70, 80,000 CAPMs, because the challenge with the CAPM, you cannot hold it for 5 years. So it will expire. And the idea by PMI that after 3 years, you go and get your PMP. So ultimately, everyone will be a PMP once. But if you compare it, the number of Google certificate owners, I think there are more Google certificate owners than CAPMs, even though the CAPM is 10 times more valuable than a Google certificate almost. I think the hard truth is nobody cares about the Google certificate. And, okay, don't get me wrong, there is a value coming with that certificate as well, but the value is not determined by me, it's determined by the job market. And if the job market say, I prefer CAPM over Google certificate, so why are you doing it in the first place for about 6 months program? And half of it is just simply copy pasting PMI. And then the other half is how Google is running projects, which is, if I'm not working for Google, will not have too much of an impact for me, if I'm not mistaken. So you are right. What I like to say also is that if someone is finishing university, you would like to become a project manager, you go for a CAPM. And I think that's where you're really going to gain the advantage, because you might not have, years of experience as a PM or a project lead, but the CAPM will equip you and say that, okay, at least I'm speaking the same language as any other PM. So therefore, I have a seat at the table and I can make things happen, because that's why the CAPM can be a big help. Absolutely.
And how is the CAPM exam changing with the PMBOK 8?
Oh, it's not going to change. Because so CAPM, the story is different. The CAPM changed 2 years ago. And that's why, last year when there was so much debate, exam is changing, PMBOK 8 is coming, I was like, okay, but they just changed it, August 2023. So are they really going to change this now? And the CAPM is, and then just for everybody's understanding, CAPM now is different than the PMP on the way that the syllabus is different. Give you a good example. So on CAPM, you're going to get 40 business analyst question. Yeah. But in a PMP, that role is non-existent. So you're not going to learn about that. And then there are people who are using the PMP material to preparing for CAPM. So that's not a good idea either. So I would say at the moment, there is no sign that the CAPM will change. I think PMI would like to gather some feedback on the PMP front. That's why they increased the number of unscored questions from 5 to 10. but they're going to be able to test the general population understanding of certain things. They might going to test a couple of BA questions, and then later on they might introducing it. But the CAPM, the CAPM is just changed August 2023, so it's not going to, at the moment, or don't get me wrong, I do not see any announcement. PMI did not announce anything. So at the moment, in July 1st, 2026, only the PMP is changing. At the moment, that's what's been announced. CAPM will not change.
And the CAPM is more of a, we'll call it an academic exam than it is a deep analysis exam like the PMP, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. PMI also trying to improve it, that they introducing more situational based scenarios, but comparing the PMP is 100% situational. CAPM, you might get just like 10%, but they are not so challenging. But yeah, it's more focused on your understanding of processes. What's the difference between Agile versus waterfall and all those terms?
Okay, so now I want to kind of transition into something a little bit more fun, because I like to come up with a personalized question for every guest of mine.
Okay.
And I want to hear some of the really good excuses you've been given by students. Some of the ones where, hey, I can't complete the program because my dog ate my homework and it's all digital.
Well, I think the best excuse is that I'm busy at work. I'm busy at work, and then I cannot carve out time. Or some people say that I only can study over the weekend, or I have less than an hour. I can only study like half an hour every day or study days. And well, it's good for you. You can do whatever you like. But I mean, you started to do something and didn't work. Yeah. Now you realize you need some help. Now you're asking for a pro for an advice. I'm telling you my advice, and you say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it this way. So why you ask the expert in the first place? So, but I mean, I'm very happy that those people at least have some level of self-awareness that they need to do something different. At least, yeah, that can be. So even on my program, so I have people who enrolled, and 2 days later they said, I'm busy at work. I will join next month. And in the past 6 months, they not even join any session. So yeah.
And then you ask, and they still haven't scheduled their exam yet.
Yes, and so as the aftermath of COVID, PMI is really considering individual circumstances, meaning that if you are just 1 month away from your eligibility and you're asking for extensions, most of the time you get your extension without any challenge. But so here is the thing. So once you apply, PMI will say you are eligible, and you are eligible for 1 year to go and do the exam. Now, if you're not doing it, you simply just reapply. So that's an easiest way. Then let's say so you have to do the exam 3 times within a year, but for everybody's understanding, or if you hear this first time, so you can do this 3 times, but every time you have to pay. This is the organization being a capitalist non-profit, but this is also also encouraging you to not just, leave it to the last minute. So yeah, there can be variations, but many times, the motives are coming from people would like to go to get a new role, or there is a new contract coming in which requires the PMs to be a PMP, and that's something new which I started to see, that there are some demands, and there are some occasions where the company is giving the demand that PMs needs to be a PMP in the next 1 or 2 years. If you can do it once, but if you're not there second time, for some companies they're showing the door, and that's very strange. But I think companies now they know what to expect from a PMP certified PM. Again, I think on different social media forums the discussions are always getting very heated about the value or what it represents, even between people who are certified or who are not certified, or even teaching, preaching, whatsoever. I think I really like to go away from that, on the extent, my view, the PMP is not an entry ticket to the MBA, so we do not need to mystify it too much. This is your bachelor degree. And since we not have any debate around, do you need a university degree, yes or no, why are we debating this? Also the next debate, which is it the PMP going to make you a good project manager, yes or no? And but here in last week, even this week, there was a post, and I made a comment. Let's say you are a lawyer and you finished in Harvard, yeah, and then it turned out in the past next 5 years you never win any case. Are you a broken lawyer? I don't think so. So why are we saying that or blame it to the education system or the Harvard diploma, whatever that is, a university degree, that you are good or not. So I think that's the same principle. Yeah.
Well, I want to caveat something that I learned the hard way. And that is, you said you've got a year to take the exam 3 times. And then if you fail it 3 times, you've got to wait a year.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things they don't tell you is it's a year from that 3rd failure. So let's say, hypothetically, I apply for the exam, or I get my year starts January 1st. I take the exam in February, I take it in April, and I take it in September. When I fail that exam in September, I'm not eligible until September of 2027 to retest.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
So, that's something that isn't talked about a lot when you start thinking about your testing strategies and stuff, because I was under the impression when I didn't pass the 3rd time, my year was from my application date and it was from the 3rd failure. So not that a lot of my audience, I want them to fail 3 times or I expect them to fail 3 times, but that's one of those things that we don't talk about enough, that's a real situation where if you keep putting it off for that 3rd exam to covet that 3rd try, you could be shooting yourself in the foot, because if something happens and you don't pass it that 3rd try, it's a year from that 3rd try, not from application date.
I think that's a valid point. And then one valid strategy can be that if you are, let's say, your eligibility period, let's say 2 months from now, you let it go, you simply apply, because for me, the 2 failures went on. So it took me like 3 years to pass, but simply because, first failure, so ashamed, like don't want to do it. Eligibility period expired. I reapplied again, but I used exactly the same, first application, and it was all accepted. So that's not an issue, but maybe that's why I not necessarily felt that pain. And I think last year I had one student who was in this type of situation. But yeah, you're right. It needs to be understood, because still, I think, what is very interesting with project managers, that so we are expected to lead. So many times you're not necessarily asking for help or for questions, and that's also showing, let's say, the character of a project manager, because let's say what seniority has really been, highlighting to you is that, are you willing to ask questions? Are you willing to ask for help? And that's not a show of weakness. That's, let's say, your self-awareness that, I'm not the smartest guy here. I have my certain purpose and goal to get things done. And I think same as with, you can apply for the PMP as well, that, you say, I go with the very first advice I read already, so for example, and then you end up meeting me and the person said, I read the PMBOK 7 2 times. I watch YouTube videos doing questions, and I think I'm good at them. Have you done anything by yourself? No, I didn't. And when is the exam? In 2 weeks' time. Can you do a full mock exam? Yeah, I can, but it's not necessary. Oh, okay. Finally, you convince the person doing it, and the person scored 40%. I'm like, so it seems like you're not ready. Oh, yeah, I think I need to move the exam date. Like, okay, fine. Again, how did you end up here? Well, I was reading a comment that I just need to read the latest PMBOK. Fine with me, my friend. But again, do a little research and ask for advice. And I think what people, afraid of is that everything will cost money. And, to some extent, nothing is free in this world. We can go general with that. But for example, with me, there is an option that you can go and have a half an hour chat with me about the PMP prep. And I'm not going to ask you anything, not going to put you in an email list. And I think you need to take that advantage, because the paradox where 4 or 5 colleagues sit together and say, oh, we're forming a study group and we're going to study together. Great. I think that's a good initiative. But who's the expert here? If we are not understand something, or 2 of us interpreted this way, 3 of us interpreted this way, now who's really right here? And if we might go with an advice, which is, John is the smartest because he's the senior, he's with the company for 20 years, and we follow him, we might go into the wrong direction, I would say.
So now's the time when I want to give you the floor, tell the audience where they can find you, what you've got, what products you're offering and services and things like that, so that everybody knows what they can expect during that 30-second call a 30-minute call that you offer to everyone.
I appreciate that. So where people can find me is going to be LinkedIn and YouTube. So in both places, I'm present, even though my strongest presence is LinkedIn. LinkedIn, not just, they can follow me as a personal kind of page or connect with me, but also I run study groups on LinkedIn, which are also, let's say, free of charge to join, to be part of discussions. We're also hosting sessions in a month where people can have a better understanding of what to expect. And I think if you set the expectations right, this whole thing will be much more smoother. Now, and then on my profile, people can actually book a free call. Now the call is really for the person. So whatever question and challenge you might have, I'm happy to kind of provide you with some feedback and how to move forward. Obviously, I do have some solutions, but that call is mainly focusing on to make sure I answering the question, because in terms of solutions, so I have full-blown solution. If you wanted to study this in a group, I call them the PMP operating system, which is very much focusing on how to fill the application, because many people are stuck with that 2-3 recycles by PMI, and then within a good 90 minutes learning, you know exactly how to do it. Study planning, what to study, when to study, how to study, what's the weekly goal you need to achieve that. We are project managers, but we are not doing a good job on this. Yeah, you can schedule and maintain a timeline for a $100 million project, but your own study plan, you absolutely fail. So I'm going to get the clarity on that. Also clarity on the mindset, which is what really the mindset is the understanding of the PMI logic. And if you understand the PMI logic, you connect it with your experience, that's where you answer questions quickly and correctly as well. And I have a full-blown explanation, categorized, I would say, and explain this all through questions. So you have a reference point, not a theoretical discussion. And it comes with a platform of weekly sessions. So I have a group who meets every Friday, regardless, except Christmas. So Christmas we not meet, but we meet every Friday, where we are very functional. We're bringing one topic on the table, explain it through questions. We're doing drag and drop exercises, group exercises together, questions together, because my philosophy here that you do not need me to explain what the scope baseline is. You can learn it, you know it by the way already, but how to answer questions 9 out of 10 times correctly. Now, this is where I'm actually can give you a great advice, and that's where my secret sauce is. So I'm helping people in a group setup that's called PMP operating system, and you're part of this group until you pass. And then I also have people in a one-on-one setup that, I have a couple of students. We exclusively working with them because now I also have a team of coaches. But the key advantage there is a dedication of the coach, who's there, who's pushing you, who's giving you the homework, who's following up on with the homework. And then it will also give you the speed, because I think you can get PMP done in a reasonable amount of time. My plan for this is, get it done in 8 weeks. I pass it in 8 weeks. Can this be done quicker? Maybe for some people, yes. But I think for majority of us, you have work, you have family, you have other commitments as well. And I think if you want to fetch it into your life, that's how you're going to get it done. And the syllabus is long. So it takes time. It's not just a weekend read and then I'm ready to tackle the questions. It takes time, and everybody learns differently. So that's where they can find me. So I'm happy to connect with any of you guys in the audience through LinkedIn, or so, through my YouTube channel as well, where I'm also dedicating to explain people what to expect and how to solve those questions. And that's why I'm trying to make that more practical approach of the PMP preparation.
And just for clarity, some of your resources are free and some of them are fee-based, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's absolutely correct.
Just want to make sure everybody understands that everything he talked about is not free.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So there are a good amount of free resources available. And then there's also, let's say, paid programs, but they are really paid based on that value which we represent and helping people to get to the finish line and you passing it. Yeah. So I don't like microwave solutions. I like to show my face there. I like to be there live. I like to be there answering your questions, because that's what you get. Otherwise, you're going to entertain yourself in different forums where 100 people say 100 different things. Again, my expertise is how to answer 9 out of 10 times correctly. How are we using it real life? It's a different discussion, but I'm just focusing on the thing.
That's why you call me.
Yeah, that's why I call you. Yeah. That's why I listen to your podcast. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's a great place to wrap. So I want to thank the Patreon subscribers who help support the show. I'd like to thank everybody listening, because you're the people that are helping me build this into what it is going to be, not what it is right now. I have just like every great PM, I have a roadmap and a plan of where I want to take this. And I'll end with, as always, don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, engage with everything. Links to all of Gabor's stuff will be in the show notes. So if you're unsure of where to find him, I'll have all of his links there. And I'll end like I always do. May all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. For Gabor Stramb, I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the Disgruntled PM. Thanks for listening.